The United Galactic Academy wasn't a school, it was a test. A floating fortress orbiting Gliese 581G, where species from all known systems trained under one roof, side by side, watched, ranked, and measured. Humans were the newest addition to this elite melting pot. And judging by the way Mason Trigg's hand was now hanging at an odd angle, they still hadn't earned their place. The moment it happened, the entire training room froze. The sharp crack echoed louder than the warning bells before a meteor breach. A sound so visceral, even the instructor blinked. Mason's fingers twisted unnaturally, his wrists slack, bones shattered like thin glass beneath the weight of a Zolorian palm. Tarl Vrek stood over him, taller by nearly 3 feet, his emerald scales shimmering under the bright ceiling lights. His clawed hand still rested where Mason's had been just moments ago. He didn't apologize. Didn't look worried. Just smirked like a predator satisfied with the crunch. "Oops," Tarl said, eyes flicking to the instructor. "Terran bones." "Delicate." Laughter followed. Some chuckles. Some uneasy. Some purely amused. Mason didn't flinch. Didn't cry out. He just stepped back, gently cradling his right hand with his left, his face unreadable. Instructor Chow's voice cracked through the tension. "Enough. Everyone back in formation. Vrek, you were told to demonstrate control. Not brute force." Tarl shrugged. "The instructions weren't clear, sir." A flicker of discomfort crossed the instructor's face. But he didn't press further. Protocol at the Academy leaned toward avoiding escalation, especially involving species like the Zolorians, high donors, high casualties. Political currency. Mason met Chow's eyes. "Permission to visit Med Bay, sir?" The instructor nodded, already looking past him. But Mason didn't move. He turned toward Tarl, his voice calm, level, cold. "You have 2 minutes," he said. Tarl raised a brow. "To do what?" "Apologize?" "To leave this room," Mason replied, "with everything you walked in with." That silenced even the gigglers in the back row. Then Mason turned and walked out. The corridor pulsed with light and slow, steady beats. Every 10 seconds, a ripple of artificial blue washed over the hallway walls. Mason walked calmly, his steps even. His wrist throbbed, a rhythmic pain that radiated into his elbow. But his breathing remained steady. He wasn't angry. Not really. Tarl had done what every arrogant species did when they thought humans were ornamental additions to the Alliance, a showpiece species, all smiles and diplomacy and no real danger. They'd seen the movies, the peace talks, the trade deals. But they hadn't read the field manuals. They hadn't been to the mountain camps in Patagonia, where cadets learn restraint first, then survival second. At the 50-second mark, Mason passed the med bay doors. He didn't go in. Back in the training hall, Tarl was holding court. Laughing. Flexing his clawed hands as he mimicked the way Mason's fingers bent like twigs. "Did you see his face?" "Nothing. Not even a squeal. Cold little mammal." A Eulaxian cadet, a slug-like being with shimmering eye stalks, glanced toward the door. "He gave you a timer." Tarl chuckled. "For what?" "He'll report it to the Dean of Diversity and cry about microaggressions." Another laugh. Someone muttered, "Humans and their drama." But at the 115-second mark, the door slid open again. Mason walked in. Quiet. Focused. His right hand was still broken, bound in a rough sling he'd made from his uniform sleeve. His eyes, though, were unbandaged. And cold. The room didn't notice him right away. He didn't speak. He walked straight to the line where he'd been standing before the injury, and stopped precisely at the 2-minute mark. "Hey," Tarl said, noticing him now. "You forget your apology?" Mason's left hand moved before the sentence finished. 3 motions. That's all it took. The first, a fast twist of Tarl's left wrist at a 14-degree angle inward. Zolorian joint flexion didn't tolerate torque on the inner radius. Mason knew that. The sound that followed wasn't as loud as before, but more sickening. The second, a palm strike, open and surgical, to the base of the nerve junction behind Tarl's elbow. It paralyzed the arm momentarily. Enough for the third move. A step-in knee to the femoral cluster on Tarl's inner thigh. He collapsed. No one moved. Tarl screamed. Not a dramatic roar, just a strangled, shocked noise. More disbelief than pain. Mason leaned in, voice still low, still emotionless. That was restraint. Next time you use your full strength, I'll show you mine. Instructor Chow didn't speak. His face was pale, his datapad trembling slightly in one hand. Tarl writhed, gasping, reaching for his disabled arm. The entire class, made of dozens of species, didn't laugh this time. They watched Mason like he was a new kind of problem. Not just a human. A warning. Mason stepped back. He didn't look around. Didn't gloat. Just walked back toward the door, left hand still clutching the broken right. As the doors slid open, a voice behind him whispered, one of the cadets, maybe the Alaxian, maybe someone else. 2 minutes. Mason didn't respond. But the corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile. Just a signal. It had begun. Mason's footfalls were steady as he left the training hall again, though his right arm hung like dead weight. The sleeve sling he'd tied couldn't keep the bones in place, but that wasn't its purpose. It was a message, I'm still functioning. And for now, that was enough. He wasn't heading to the med bay. Not yet. He needed a hallway. Quiet. Empty. 3 turns down from Training Wing Delta, there was a maintenance corridor where the light panels flickered on a delay. Cadets rarely used it. Mason stopped there and leaned against the wall. He finally let out a breath, not of pain, but calculation. His thumb was gone. Not literally, but structurally. The fracture was complete. The metacarpals were cracked. His radius might have chipped. He rotated his shoulders slowly, testing compensation options. The pain registered in spikes, but Mason didn't flinch. He filed it under useful data. How many seconds left? 1 minute, 10. He checked nothing, not his wristband, not his comm. Mason had spent enough time training under pressure that he could feel the time pass in muscle memory. His instructors back on Earth had drilled it into him, internal clock, heartbeat tracking, situational sync. The body could learn rhythm like language. A soft footstep behind him. You're not going to report this, a voice asked. Mason didn't turn. You followed me. Yes. The speaker stepped into view, a tall, feathered humanoid with a sharp gaze. A Shrikai cadet named Vissen. She was known for her observational precision, not her words. He crushed your hand, Vissen said plainly. You could have had him expelled. Mason shook his head. Expulsion would have made a martyr. This way, he becomes a story. Vissen narrowed her eyes. You're calculating. No, Mason said, starting to walk again. I'm human. Back in the training hall, Tarl paced the mat, restlessly flexing his claws. The mood had shifted. No more laughter. The Zalorian's confidence now looked rehearsed, like an actor who'd forgotten his next line. Think he'll come back? One cadet asked. Tarl snorted. For what? Another lesson in humility? But his laugh didn't carry the same weight. The timer ticked in the back of everyone's mind, even those without human time sense could feel it. Something about the phrase "you have 2 minutes" had settled in like a countdown to detonation. They watched the door more than the instructor now. Instructor Chow tried to reclaim control, directing attention back to the anatomy module. But no one was listening. They were waiting. The silence was broken by the slow hiss of the sliding door. Exactly at minute 2. Mason walked back in. This time, there was no conversation. No threats. No setup. He moved. Fast. Tarl turned, surprised, but too late. Mason's left hand caught the Zalorian's left wrist. Not to break it. Just to anchor it. He stepped inside the guard and drove his knee into the point beneath the ribcage split. Not brute force. Technique. Tarl buckled. Another motion, Mason twisted the Zalorian's elbow behind his back, locked it, then snapped his foot forward to knock Tarl off balance. The larger cadet crashed to the mat. Mason straddled him, pinning the arm. He didn't raise a fist. He pressed 2 fingers into a spot near Tarl's collarbone, one of the Zalorian nerve clusters that overloaded sensory input. Tarl shrieked, not from damage, but from an intensity that disoriented him completely. The rest of the room stood frozen. Instructor Chow shouted, "Cadet Trigg, stand down." But Mason didn't respond. His eyes stayed locked on Tarl. "You broke my hand," he said. "That was simple physics. You wanted to prove dominance." He pressed slightly harder. Tarl's legs spasmed involuntarily. "This," Mason said, "is biology. You didn't think we studied yours." Then he released the pressure point. Tarl gasped like he'd surfaced from drowning. Mason stood. The room didn't cheer. No one clapped. It was dead quiet. Chow took a cautious step forward. "You've made your point." "No," Mason said. "The point makes itself." Then he turned to the others. "You've all studied human behavior files. You've seen our movies, read our histories. But you missed the footnotes. We don't lead with violence. We lead with patience. And when that runs out..." He paused. "We don't need weapons." Mason walked out again. This time, no one stopped him. The instructor didn't speak. Tarl didn't move. Only after the door closed did anyone breathe. One of the younger cadets, barely out of orientation, whispered, "He didn't even use his good hand." In the corridor, Mason didn't smile. He kept walking, left hand still supporting his right. Visson reappeared beside him. "You're going to be famous." Mason shook his head. "I'm going to be targeted." "Still worth it?" He didn't answer immediately. They turned a corner, and for a second, the hallway lights dimmed, caught between energy cycles. In the dark, Mason finally said, "Yes." Because he hadn't just defended himself. He had declared presence. And now, the Academy would never see humans the same way again. Mason sat alone in the observation deck, overlooking the blue curve of Gliese 581G's atmosphere. The Academy rotated silently beneath him, a perfect orbit, balanced by equations more precise than emotion. His right hand was wrapped now, clean, tight, professionally done. The med bay technician hadn't asked questions, just treated the injury with sterile efficiency. Word had already spread. Footsteps approached. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Ambassador Reza, Earth's delegate to the United Galactic Alliance, stopped behind him. No greeting. Just presence. "They're calling it the incident," Reza finally said. Mason didn't respond. "The Inquiry Council meets in 3 hours, the ambassador continued. Zalorian representatives want sanctions. They're spinning it as an unprovoked human assault on a superior officer." Mason turned slightly. "He's a cadet. Same rank. They don't see it that way." Silence fell again. Reza moved to the window, clasping his hands behind his back. "You could have walked away. Filed a report. Waited for the process." "I did walk away. Not far enough." Mason tilted his head. "You said it yourself, they weren't going to treat it like an assault. They'd call it a misunderstanding, issue a warning." Tarl would have done it again. Reza exhaled slowly. "You're not wrong. But I'm still the problem. You're the first human in a decade to show them what we're capable of without raising a weapon. That terrifies them more than any soldier." The hearing chamber was oval, metallic, sterile. Each delegation sat behind transparent panels, their species insignias glowing faintly. Mason stood alone in the center. No restraints. No council. Tarl sat to the left, his arm braced, a scowl across his scaled face. His pride had taken more damage than his bones. A holographic judge shimmered into existence above the center dais. Cadet Mason Trigg, it began. You are charged with violating Interspecies Protocol 47B, use of excessive force during intercadet instruction. Do you have a statement? Mason met its eyes, simulated or not, and spoke clearly. Yes. My hand was broken intentionally. I gave a verbal warning. I acted within restraint. And I stopped before permanent damage. Whispers rippled among the delegates. One of the Zolorian representatives hissed, "You disabled our cadet." Mason nodded. Correct. You did so using knowledge of Zolorian physiology. Also correct. The judge leaned forward, digital gaze sharp. Why not inform your instructor? Request formal mediation? I've read the last 3 complaints filed by Terran cadets. 2 were dismissed. 1 was under review for 8 months. No action taken. Another ripple. Your behavior risks diplomatic fallout, the judge warned. No, Reyes' voice came from behind. His restraint prevented it. All heads turned. The ambassador stepped into the circle. The academy was established to foster trust between species. Not dominance. If humans are expected to act like prey in the name of diplomacy, then the system is broken. The judge paused. Final determination, no expulsion. No criminal sanction. However, Cadet Trigg will be suspended from physical combat courses for 1 rotation. Mason didn't react. Tarl stood abruptly. This is unacceptable. His own delegate grabbed his arm and forced him down. The next day, Mason returned to the training wing, not to participate, but to observe. He walked past silent cadets. Some stared. Some looked away. No one joked. No one jeered. A group of Zentari engineers stopped talking as he passed, eyes flicking between his bandaged arm and his expression. He wasn't angry. He wasn't proud. He was present. At the far end of the hall, a Eulaxian cadet approached. You did something irreversible, it said. Mason looked up. Explain. They feared humans before. Now they respect us. But not out of admiration, out of uncertainty. Mason nodded. That's how real respect begins. The Eulaxian tilted its eye stalks. And if they push again? Mason didn't smile. I won't count to 2 next time. That evening, Mason stood at the gym doorway, watching the empty floor. Footsteps behind him. It was Visson. I heard the Shrikai Council sent a message, she said. They want to invite Terran instructors to their academies. Visson nodded. We don't ignore potential once it reveals itself. They stood in silence for a moment. Do you regret it? She asked. Mason shook his head. Only that it had to happen at all. She looked at him. That's the only kind of strength that matters. As she walked past him and into the gym, she glanced back once. You didn't just teach him a lesson, she said. You taught all of us one. Later that night, Mason sat in his quarters, hands still aching beneath the wrap. The pain was useful. It reminded him, some wars are fought in silence. Not for territory, or resources, or victory. But for the right to stand without being dismissed. He flexed his fingers slowly, one at a time. Even broken, they could still make a point.